Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How you doing? I hope you're doing good. Big mahalo for tuning in and listening. Today we're continuing a little mini-series, if you will, with some artists that I saw in Australia recently. I had the good fortune to be introduced to a few different new artists, or people that I wasn't aware of is a better way to describe it, while I was down there. And this cat that we're going to talk to was warming up for Carole King at the Sydney Entertainment Centre. He played solo acoustic. It really blew me away. Over the course of his set, this guy who I had not heard of prior to being there, one dude with a guitar in an arena with 12,000 people, I realized I had really been missing a lot in music. And in the early 80s, this talented gentleman and his folk rock band called Goanna, like the Lizards there in Australia, recorded a landmark song, Solid Rock. It was about the native people of Australia, the painful story of their stolen land, in a lot of ways similar to stories that are familiar to Americans. It's unlikely he knew his song would become a landmark Australian composition when he did it. We'll hear more about that. He's been an active solo artist and collaborator since the late 80s. His latest album is Other Side of the Rock. Please join me in welcoming the gifted artist Shane Howard. Aloha and mahalo, Brother Shane. Thank you so much for doing this.
Aloha, Dave. Aloha, Honolulu, and surrounding islands.
Yeah, we are statewide, so yeah, you're reaching them all, and it's really nice of you to do this. Thank you very much, Brother Shane.
Well, thank you for talking to us too, Dave. It's great to talk out across the Pacific.
Yeah, man, in our Asia-Pacific neighborhood, as we sort of like to call it here in the islands. First of all, have you ever been up here to Hawaii, Shane?
I have. I haven't spent a lot of time there. In the early days when I was in the band Goanna, we came to America quite a bit, and I got to, of course, in those days, flights didn't reach all the way to LA, and you'd often be transiting through Honolulu or Hawaii. And I've dreamed, it's a bit of a dream of mine to get to your shores, because we're very much a surfing beach nation too. So,
right.
And so many friends have told me about, Maui and the beautiful countryside, and very much like the northern part of Australia.
Yeah, I'm sure. And when I was there, I noticed that the surfing sentiment was definitely very strong. Any particular Hawaii memories that come to mind now that you're thinking about it?
Just that it's like Australia's a really old country. It's like once you go into the desert country, it's exhausted. The mountains are they're barely mountains anymore, because it's such an old landmass. And mountains that were once the size of the Himalayas are now reduced to, desert sand and rubble and whatever. Whereas Hawaii is this new, towering and rich, verdant kind of landmass.
Lush.
And yeah, anyone who brings you, it's just a great atmosphere of laid back nature. The whole notion of surfing came to us from you guys, so thanks for that.
Ah, well, you're welcome. I'll speak for everyone. But that's cool, and there is that strong connection. Even billabong, you see the word everywhere here on people's clothes, and that's like a word from down under, right?
It is. A billabong is like, when a river is winding, and then it cuts a path through and cuts off the winding part of the river and goes straight ahead. The remnant that it leaves behind, the remnant bend, is called a billabong.
Different than a wollongong.
Wollongong. Some of the indigenous words are really Manangatang, Wollongong, Woolloomooloo, are very beautiful, very rhyming, very rhythmical.
Yeah, they are. They're fun to say. When I was there, I had a really good time throwing those words around, and people, it got a few chuckles out of folks, as I'm sure you can imagine, doing that sort of thing. When I think about your life, I've been studying you ever since the thing. I was just totally blown away. I haven't really had that kind of thing happen where you go to a show, you think like you've seen a lot of folks, and all of a sudden you get a whole new musical chapter that you got to learn about. And from studying you, it seems like your family played a big role getting you into music, Mom in particular. Share some of your earliest musical memories where you realized this was possibly going to be your path.
Well, I grew up in a musical family. Like you said, my mum played piano and sang, and we sang as a family. There were 7 kids. We played around. We sang around the piano at home, and music was, an essential part of life. And we used to play at community gatherings. It wasn't something you did for money. It was something you did at church. And Mum used to play the organ at church, and we'd sing at weddings or St. Patrick's Day dances or community gatherings, all sorts of things. I guess there was a lovely sense of, because as a family, you're always fighting with your brothers and sisters. But there's a lovely sense of when you're doing music, it was all about harmony. It was all in a literal sense and a figurative sense. It was about, you have to have it together. And I think it's a lovely element of music is that it's, someone once said to me, it's how humans flock.
I like that description, though, too. It's kind of like even bands that like completely can't stand each other, when they're on stage, a lot of the time, that's like the moment that everything gels. And like you said, it's harmony on multiple levels, if you will.
Absolutely. And we turn together. And it's an extraordinary thing. I'm eternally fascinated by music, and it's the power of it and the fact that it opens up different aspects of our brain, really, and our consciousness. And it's a very, very powerful form. And I guess I learned that at an early age. And people say, music is a gift. I understand that now. It's a gift because it's given to you. And in our case, it was given to us by our mother. And of course, Dad enforced the rehearsals.
So he played a role too.
He did. Well, he played piano to a little. He played more by ear, and stuff. And my mother worked on radio just in our local town, a little country town, during the war years when she was very young.
So radio also has a part in your life.
Absolutely, yeah. The radio's essential because I actually, there was a time when the radio was probably more important than the television.
Definitely. Well, that was the case, and in a lot of ways, because of the way the internet is becoming such a visual thing, it's kind of usurping the territory in the United States, at least, of cable and of some of the things that TV does. So in a lot of ways, that could be happening again, because for some reason, radio still, the power of spoken word, still is a medium in demand. There's getting back to your mom, something I'm kind of curious about. We know that the music, from talking and from reading about you, I know that the musical inspiration, we can see how it came from your folks and from your mom in particular. The sentiment and vibration of the song Solid Rock. Where are the roots to this sort of critical self-reflection? Did that come from your parents, or how did that develop in you?
Well, my mum and dad weren't racist. They were very open-minded people. They were great social justice people too. And they gave us those values from a very young age. But I grew up in a time where, when television came to us, the things that bombarded into our life as a child was the civil rights movement in America. And I had we had an English neighbour who came and lived next door to us, and he got to know my older brother, very well, who then got a guitar, which was a source of fascination for me. And one day I went in with my brother, and he played all these records that his friends had sent in from England. And one was an album called The Times Are A-Changing by Bob Dylan. And it woke something up in me, particularly the song With God on Our Side, and all those very, very powerful songs. The very first song I learned to play on guitar was Blowin in the Wind. And so that, fueled by the imagery that we're receiving from America of the civil rights movement, then the death of John F. Kennedy, the death of Martin Luther King, these things impacted on us powerfully right across the other side of the Pacific. And it wasn't then until, I suppose, in the early mid-70s, my own revelation came, and I realized, oh my God, the country that I'm living in, it's not just America, the country that I'm living in is deeply racist too, and there are things here that have to change.
So it was something that you come across as that coming of age, which, is not a lot different than a lot of American kids as they grow up too. It almost, and I could be wrong in this, but um, my perception is from at least the concert and from what I've read about the movement, the issues, that Australia is not as far along in the recognition and rights of Native people whose land was stolen as the United States is, which is like a similar sort of thing that we did. And what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a bit more complex for America or for the US in the sense that you've got the whole level of slavery, which and the whole African American reality, which is a huge part of your consciousness. We don't quite have that dimension. For us, it's, I suppose, more like your relationship with the First Nations people. But here, we're back in those early years when I was a child, our population wasn't that big, so and Aboriginal people were very present for me growing up, and in that sense, I suppose I don't mean to be disrespectful, but African American people were not native people to America, so there wasn't that sense of belonging to country. Whereas here in Australia, Aboriginal people have been here for 60,000 years and more. It's an incredible chapter in human history. Some of the oldest archetypal human myths and legends and stories still exist here in a traditional state up until the 1970s and the 1980s. It's an extraordinary tale because Australia was an island and so far removed. There was almost a separate preservation and development of that remarkable human story, and it's an extraordinary culture in that sense. It's just something for me that I've been deeply moved by over the years. It's a very human thing too. My relationship with Indigenous people is actually it's about friendships, and a lot of it, a lot of these people are my very dear friends. So it's not an anthropological point of view.
Totally, and I can understand. I mean, there's really, you're very right. I mean, we have multiple terrible aspects of our past, between the slavery thing, between stealing all the land, and I guess I was saying more like my experience is also limited to having seen you. So when I saw you, I saw you live. You're in this arena. It's Sydney, Australia. I think it was like a Thursday night. There's 12,000 people. It's a Caucasian audience basically, and you were really provoking to them, and I could sense that it was a provoking thing for them. Like you had a little rap that you talked about relating to Aboriginal rights and relating to, one day we'll make this a decent and honorable country yet, you sort of said. And as you said that, you could hear this like murmur in the audience. And I guess that's what informed my statement that my limited experience, again, that's why I paint you the picture I saw so that I only have limited background with this, but it just seemed to me that I had this instant respect for you because you were being so bold and talking about something that was clearly to a lot of people in that room, to them, a controversial issue. To me, it was an obvious one, and I guess I saw that similarity to America, where we all, collectively, we I think a lot of people have to face that guilt and that recognition of Native people. So I saw it there too, like live and in person with you in a way I had never experienced.
Well, I guess I learned early on, Dave, guilt is a wasted emotion. Justice isn't, and justice is a really important thing. I learned all this from my mum and dad growing up. I learned it from the songs of Bob Dylan. I learned it from Martin Luther King and the John F. Kennedys. These people who, from your country, that inspired us out here on the other side of the Pacific. Does justice matter? We have to ask ourselves these questions. Is it important? Because I think it is, and I've thought long and deep about these things. And I think it is important to be honourable. Everything, our Bible or our, whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, whether it's the Hindu or Muslim or whatever it is, all our faith structures around the world teach us the same thing about, the value of mercy and modesty and justice and, good behaviour. So we have to ask ourselves, do these things matter? And I think it does. If you want to be a righteous nation, if you want to be a good nation, and in that sense, I know that sounds simplistic, but it goes to the heart of a society that you don't approach. How do we address these things here in Australia with our Indigenous people? How do we make things right for the fact that we, in our colonial times, we actually took this country, and it was a process of theft, not deliberate for most of the people at the bottom of, the social order. And the same in the States. How do we address this now in the modern world? How do we come to terms with it? How do we make good? How do we make ourselves a better society and a better country and a just nation, a just world? And I really think that we're moving in that direction as a global society, that we're moving towards the right way of doing things. It's about global justice and for all humans and all humanity. And every now and then we have an aberration like the Second World War, or there are these aberrations that come along and people do terrible things. I mean, you've had to live with that just recently in the States with what happened in Boston.
Absolutely.
The killing of innocent lives. I mean, it is never justifiable. And, and these things happen here early in Australia in our colonial period. They're very heavy things and they're hard things to live with, but I believe being guilty about them and putting them up under the rug makes for trouble down the line. And I think at some stage as a society, you've got to lift the rug up and go, okay, let's have a look at this stuff and deal with it.
Oh, and that's completely the kind of vibration that it seemed like you were presenting live in concert. I mean, it was really outstanding. It was riveting. It was the kind of thing, it was hard to believe that this was the first act of the night because it was so compelling. And some of the lyrics to the song, let's talk about the song a little bit, because it is just this monumental thing. Where did those lyrics come from? Talk about the inspiration and the origins of this landmark tune, Solid Rock.
Well, we were a very young emerging band. We didn't have any record deal or any real clout. We were just touring around our little region and trying to get a following and get a name for ourselves. I got very sick and very run down. I was married. I had a couple of kids. My wife was, teaching in the daytime, and I'd be up at 7 a.m. and looking after the kids because they were young. And then the evening I'd be out doing gigs, not getting home till 1, 2 a.m, travelling. And so when I got very run down, the doctor sent me away for a break, and I always wanted to go to a place called Uluru in Central Australia, in the middle of the Red Desert country, if I can paint a picture for you. And in the middle of that red desert, our desert is not like the Sahara, it's like maybe around Tucson or something like that. Rocky hills and no cactus, of course, but scrubby country. And it's red sand, luminous red almost. In the middle is this giant monolithic, the largest stone, if you like, the largest monolith in the world, this massive rock. And of course, for the indigenous people who live there and have lived there for tens of thousands of years, the Untitled people, it's like the Bible, this massive stone that's 9 kilometres around, 360 metres high. All the markings on it, the little indentations and the cracks and the breaks and them are all essential elements of a story that is essentially like like I said, their Bible, all those mythological stories are written on those walls by nature and carved out by time. Going there as a young man, it absolutely, I was transformed by the depths of understanding that hit me there of the cultural and spiritual reality of Aboriginal people. And one night, there was a little sign at the camping ground where I was, because it was very basic in those days. There was a little sign that said, Inmar, other side of the rock, sunset. And I said to the woman who was putting up, I said, what's an Inmar? And she said, oh, it's like a corroboree, a dance, a celebration, a song and dance. So I walked in the afternoon around to the other side of the rock, and it took quite a while. It's a long way. And when I got there was a group of Aboriginal people from Armada, and they were painting up with ochre, white ochre, and preparing for dance. And as the sun went down, if you can imagine a circle of fires, which was like the performance area, and as the sun was going down and it was darkening, the women started clapping and chanting, Madonna, Madonna. And the dancers leapt into the circle of fires, and painted with white ochre all over their bodies as they were. In the firelight, they looked like spirits because you couldn't see their black bodies against the background. They looked like spirits moving. At that very moment that the dance began, the full moon rose over the silhouetted form of this monolith, Uluru, at the back. And something in me woke up. I woke up to the intelligence at work. That was artistic, that was spiritual, that was practical, and it told the story of the Seven Sisters. And so I got to sleep that night, stay there with the people and camp out with them. And they're very traditional people and camp in the circle with them. And I guess that was my waking up moment to the depth of that cultural and spiritual life. And it's been a journey that's continued my entire life.
Did you? How long did it take before you realized that this song was like firing a gun? It was the first pop culture song to deal with the topic of Aboriginal rights. It was the first. You're the first group that used a didgeridoo, right, in a commercial tune, even before Midnight Oil.
That's true. The next day, while I'd been at Uluru, I wrote down, out here nothing changes, not in a hurry anyway, and I was writing really about the landscape. And then after that performance, I guess the song went deeper. And but then I went back to Alice Springs, the nearest major town, and I saw again once I came out of that cultural landscape back to the modern township, I saw all the alcoholism, the drunkenness, the neglect, the racism, the abuse, the dispossession. And it became an angry song, I guess, in that last verse that talked about those aspects. At the time, Dave, it was just the next song that I wrote. And then we performed it. We got to tour. We got a big break in September of 1981, and we were given the opportunity to do the opening spot for James Taylor, his first tour of Australia. And he'd been a great hero of mine, and it was great to see, to meet him and his band, Lee Sklar, all those great musicians. And we had a great tour and a great time travelling with them. And in Adelaide, Australia, South Australia, on the very last day of the tour, we performed Solid Rock, and Billy Cummins was playing didgeridoo, an Aboriginal fella was playing didgeridoo with us. And we performed Solid Rock as our last song. At the end of the song, the audience stood up and gave us a standing ovation. And that's a really unusual thing for an opening act, who are really unknown. And I guess I knew at that point that there was something extraordinary going on with that song, and that maybe our generation were ready for change.
It's a remarkable story. I just love the way I can just see it all. That was a very good moment. And early on, too, I might add that you were able to recognize what was going on with this tune, because now we're talking about it, and it's 2013, and the thing is just as epic as it was then. And some of those words, really powerful words in that last verse, I guess you would say. They're standing on the shore one day, saw the white sails in the sun. Wasn't long before they felt the sting. White man, white law, white gun. Don't tell me that it's justified, because somewhere someone lied. You know, the thing I think is interesting about the tune, and it's also a connection to Hawaii too, is the Captain Cook reference that comes in at the end of the tune. And I don't have to tell you his connection to the islands. You know what I find interesting, and you'll tell me if I'm picking up something or not. And I've heard you sing this tune. I've heard other people sing it. When you get to that last part, which is to me the emotional climax of the song, where you would expect the line to be just screamed out. Whenever anyone says the Captain Cook lied part, it's really almost said under your breath, almost like you're treading on sacred ground by saying something like that.
Yeah, well, it's true, because Cook went back from Australia, and well, he took possession of Australia for King George the Third, I think it was, or Fifth, and he had instructions, specific instructions from the Admiralty, and I've seen those instructions about to enter into communications with any native people, to enter into good relations, and to come to an arrangement. And if it was uninhabited, to take possession for England. Now, he knew it was inhabited, but before he left, and he had terrible trouble. He could not make contact with the people. Wherever he stopped, they ran away from him in Australia. They didn't want anything to do with them. They left gifts for them on the shoreline, but the Australian Aboriginal people just didn't want anything to do with them, hardly at all. And there was one instance where they were in North Queensland, not far before he left, where they were doing repairs to the boat, and his men caught 12 turtles, and they brought them back to the boat. And some of the Indigenous Aboriginal people came on board the boat, and they saw the turtles, and when they were leaving, they said, indicated that we'll take 2 or 3 of the turtles. And Cook and his men said to them, no, they're our turtles. And they said, yeah, but we'll have a couple of them, not in English, of course. But they wouldn't give them any. And so the Aboriginal people left and went back to the shore, and they set fire to the country where Cook and his men had their shore camp, and burnt their shore camp out. As if to say, you're selfish and you're greedy, you won't even share. You think you own things, but you don't. We can just set fire to this and the wind will burn your shore camp out. It was an interesting little moment that this clash of cultures where they just couldn't recognize what was in front of them.
Yeah. Well, obviously, bro, you know how the story goes when it comes
Well, I do, and what was amazing, Dave, about that song is that it got traction in South Africa. It got traction in and even in South America. Not in a big way, but I realised, I didn't realise at the time, but the song is as relevant for, say, Columbus or Africa or a lot of those.
It's multicultural.
Countries.
You can apply it to a lot of. You can apply it to a lot of places that suffered like the similar fate. You're absolutely right.
And of course, Cook went on to Hawaii, as you said, and
never left.
He met his fate there. He met his destiny there.
Became a permanent resident, as we like to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
I don't think he was a bad man. I think he was just a lieutenant initially and then a captain in the Admiralty, and he would have had no real power. And he was a brilliant navigator, no doubt about it. But he was, as all of the people at that time, it was a clash of cultures. They were out of their depth, but at the same time, his journals also prove very, very significant in terms of understanding maybe some of that early history as we look back.
It's great that the song has that kind of, as you pointed out, you can apply it to cultures all over the world, and It's just one part of what makes you a very special performer. And to this day, you continue to be involved with local folks. You did this record, which I wanted to have you give a little plug to before I wrap it up with you. Other Side of the Rock, that is your most recent effort, right, Shane?
It is, yeah.
And where are you at right now? Like that's the last thing that you did. You're playing lots of gigs around there. Some of them quite prestigious, like the tour with Carol. Where's your head at today musically in terms of the latest stuff that you're up to?
Well, it was called The Other Side of the Rock as we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Solid Rock, and we took that song back out to Uluru with a big ensemble, a big cast of a lot of people. It was a really beautiful production to do with the community back out there, and we translated the song back into Pitjantjatjara, the language of the Yolngu people out of Uluru, and we had the children sing it.
It was amazing video. The video of that is like, you get chills watching that video that you're talking about from last year.
It was such a beautiful thing to do. I've been spending a lot of time out there over the last few years. It was exhausting, and I came back home the last couple of months. I've been building a room onto my house and working with a friend of mine who is a builder. And it's good, honest work, digging holes, putting in footings, and it's very grounding to, because fame and success, those sorts of things fame's a great deceiver, and you've got to keep grounding yourself back in the country and, back in with the people. And but the next thing is I want to go completely away from that big ensemble reality and come back to a very simple, go right back to almost a song stripped bare. And the next lot of songs I've been writing are very close to home, and I want to try and keep that in a very a kind of folk purity almost, and keep it very, very simple. I got to go to Canada last year and tour through there, and it was really, I should have gone years ago. It was a great, great time. And I'm very, very keen over the next, while I've got legs to carry me, Dave, to try and bring my songs and to the States. We have so much in common, and so much of our music and our literature and films and stuff, so much influence has come out of the States that I'd love to take a little piece of that influence from an Australian point of view back to the States, and maybe come to Hawaii, come and see you fellas, and
I'd love that.
Share our stories.
I'd love that, and I think your story, especially the sentiment, the kind of cat that you are that would write a tune like Solid Rock, that says a lot. I'm sure a lot of Native Hawaiian people would think your efforts are outstanding, and no doubt would be well appreciated all across the United States, where there's so many valuable North American, Native American tribes that are a real big part of our culture, and on top of that, the door is open for you here. If there's ever a chance to just bring you up here with your guitar. And on that note, you talk about like bringing it back to a folksy sort of origin. To prepare for this interview, I listened to so many different live tracks of yours, some studio tracks, and all the versions of Solid Rock that I've ever heard. When you say you want to bring it back to just you and the guitar, strip it down, the best version was you on stage opening for Carole King. So I think you're on to something, bro. You really are you're the kind of cat, you don't need a big ensemble. You do it by yourself, and it's like, it works.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, brother. And thanks for your kind words. And yeah, sometimes it's lovely to just get right back down to tin tacks, to the song stripped bare, like I said, and in the bigger scheme of things, I think if I learned anything back there when I was younger and in my travels, it's that respect is at the heart of everything, and it's such a beautiful word and a beautiful idea, and I think it's no matter where we come from, what religious background or cultural background, if we have respect travelling beside us, we will behave the right way, because everything will flow from that. And I think that's where historically we keep going wrong, is once we get arrogant or haughty, or we put money before those important aspects of respectful behaviour, I think that's where we get into trouble as humans.
Some valuable words. Shane Howard is the artist, and Other Side of the Rock. His latest, he'll have a lot more, though, because he's got a lot to say. And I hope that you had fun talking today and that this kept you entertained, Shane.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Thanks for your depth of research. Thank you for bothering and taking the time. It's really lovely to send a shout-out across the Pacific to Hawaii.
Amen. Maybe I'll show up one of these days. I'd love to do the Great Ocean Road. I know you live right in koala and kangaroo country there in Port Fairy. So one of these days I may be there walking around hanging out with you. So
well, there's a great festival here just a few miles down the road, the Port Fairy Folk Festival, and it brings artists from all around the world every year. And where I'm living and where I'm sitting right now, we look out right on the edge of the Southern Ocean. We look out to Antarctica. So we're right down on the edge of the world here, Dave, and we'd love to see you here. And maybe you'll see me there in Honolulu.
Well, I'll be working to try to make that happen.
Aloha. You're listening to Shane Howard, and you're right where you should be, listening to Dave Lawrence. Aloha. It's Shane Howard, and you're right where you should be, tuned to Dave Lawrence.
I'll give you a hug, a high five. You stay in touch. You got my email. We'll try to. I'll introduce your package of material to some people I know who do shows. No guarantees, but if there's any way to get you up here, like I said, I was not kidding. You don't need a band, dude. Your gift is you, the guitar, and a microphone. You're ready to go.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for taking the time, and you, like I said, your depth of research. It's deeply appreciated, brother.
You're the man. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you, and I'm sure our paths will cross again. Stay safe, Brother
Absolutely.
Shane. Aloha, my brother.
How do you say farewell?
Everyone just aloha. It's kind of like how in Hebrew shalom is like hello and goodbye. Aloha is the same way.
Aloha.
That's it. Aloha, Brother Shane. What'd you say?
As the local Aboriginal mob would say here, wuduk.
Wuduk?
Wuduk. Yeah.
Wuduk, like W-O-D-O-K? Wuduk?
Well, it's actually spelled like W-U-U-W-U-U-K.
Okay.
But it's pronounced Wuduk.
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 Aloha.
Right back at you. I'll talk to you soon. Be safe, Shane.
See you, Dave.
Aloha, dude.
Bye, brother.